improv classes, most of the people, they don't seem to have anything in common, but then they do kind of get into that space of vulnerability where they're able to find those places of connection.
This is Improv in Real Life. I'm Jude Treder-Wolff. In this podcast, we'll explore how improv can help us navigate the speed of life through conversations with experts who are wise, hilarious, and deeply human.
It's my first day of my first professional job as a music therapist. And I feel like Maria in The Sound of Music, when she gets sent out from the convent to go and be a governess for this big family of 7 kids. They're all strangers. She doesn't know what she's getting into. And she's afraid, and I'm afraid, and she has her guitar, and I have my guitar too. Now, true, she is singing through the streets of Salzburg, surrounded by the Alps on her way to a mansion, while I am tripping over literal garbage, surrounded by a heavy chain link fence on my way to a psych unit in a hospital in the heart of downtown Newark, New Jersey. And this is 1982, Newark, New Jersey. Newark is kind of bottoming out. It's rough. But I'm very, very excited about this job. Now, Maria doesn't know it yet. She is going to use music to change those people's lives. And that's what I have trained to do for 5 years. And now I landed one of the few jobs that exist in the creative arts therapy world in 1982. To be on a team of therapists creating a program on this psych unit. I'm just out of school. It's very exciting. And I get there, and the head nurse, Clarice, she's a real force of nature, a very powerful, grounded woman. She's kind of a combination of Aretha Franklin and Whoopi Goldberg with a side of Oprah. She just level the truth with you. So I'm sitting in the nurse's station, and she says, I know when you were hired to be on a team of therapists. As of a few days ago, there were some budget cuts, and now you are the team. And I say, what now? She says, you are the team. We'll get them fed and medicated, and then the whole unit of patients, they're yours for the day. I say, oh, so they chose music out of all the creative arts therapies. And she says, no, they chose the new graduate who has the lowest salary, just to be honest. And in 6 months, get ready, you're going to have to justify your existence in another budget meeting. Just get ready for that. And then she gives me a ring of keys because everything on this unit is locked, and walks me to my office. It's not really an office. What it is a shower that's been converted into a space where I can put my things. They put a desk and a lamp in there. And I literally hang my coat on the thing sticking out of the wall that the water used to come out of, stick my guitar in the corner, and I go out and I start meeting patients. Now, they're just sitting around reading magazines, smoking cigarettes, doing nothing. There's just this combination of mind-numbing boredom with sudden eruption of chaos in this environment. And one of the first patients I meet is a guy that starts following me around and helping me. I'll call him Davey. Now, Davey has this tick in his brain sometimes, and he'll say, Jude, 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 Jude. Is there somebody behind me that's going to come up and smack me in the back of the head? I just feel like there's somebody that's just going to smack me in the back of the head. And what if they did? What if I was on the subway platform? What if I was in the street? Is there somebody back there? Do you see somebody sneaking up on me right now? And I pause and I'll say, no, I don't see anybody. I think you're okay. And he's like, oh, okay. But what if I was on the street corner and on the street? What if I was on the subway platform and somebody came up and smacked me in the back of the head? I know, that would be terrible, but there's nobody right now. And he's a guy who's got a wife and a job, but now and then, as I come to know, he gets these episodes where he can't function until they straighten this out in his brain. Other than that, this is an impossible therapeutic situation. I don't know how I'm going to create groups or any group out of the diverse swath of humanity that exists in a unit where people come in through the emergency room. It could be anybody. There's a 60-year-old widower who just can't recover from his grief. There's a 20-year-old suicide survivor that's there on 72-hour observation. There are a bunch of Vietnam veterans with PTSD. And this is a time when post-traumatic stress disorder was really becoming understood and known, and there weren't a lot of treatments that people believed in. And there's a core group of patients that are chronically mentally ill that lived in state and county hospitals until they started emptying them out in the early 80s with no plan for their care. So I get to know these patients very well. At the end of that first week, I feel like Maria in West Side Story in the very last scene of that movie where she's just walking away shell-shocked from the carnage of her dreams being demolished. I don't know how I'm going to do this job, but there aren't any other jobs. So I kind of have to figure out a way to make it work. I go into the day room where we're supposed to do groups, and I have my guitar, and a few people join me, and I start just singing songs, and people are kind of drawn in, and they say, I would come to your group, except I don't have a change of clothes. They're in the clothes they were admitted in for days. People don't have hygiene products, so they don't want to sit in a room with other people. Every other patient in that hospital gets this little hygiene kit, except our patients. So those are things I just have to address first thing. I've never trained to do any of this. I just have to do it. I have to figure it out. And once I get supplies for them and we start having a little group there, and this woman comes in, I'll call her Dorothy, and she's like, this place is grim. I go, Dorothy, you are correct. And she says, no, I mean this room. Look, you can't open a window. There's no natural light in here. There's smoke has made these windows terminally tan. There's no sun. And then one of the other patients who knows me says, hey, do you know the song, Here Comes the Sun? And I say, name any Beatles song. I can play that song on my guitar. So we start singing, Here Comes the Sun. And I say, okay, guys, we're going to sing a verse of this song. And then everybody has to say one positive thing to somebody else or to the group. Either something that positive that happened to you, something positive that someone did for you, even if it's just being here right now. So Dorothy goes like, yeah, my thing is being here right now and that you finally found the sun somehow. Okay, very creative, very good. And then we go around and this becomes our morning routine. At 10 o'clock, we sing, Here Comes the Sun. Somebody has to say one positive thing. And then we make a plan for the day. And generally the first stop is the Salvation Army or Goodwill we can walk to. We go and get hygiene products. We get clothing for people. Then we come back. We have lunch. We do a reading group. We do a drawing group. We do a craft group. We'll do a cooking group. We'll make cookies. And every day we just kind of plan something and figure out what people want to do and who's available to do it. But because of the singing, I have to say, and because of the hygiene products, we begin to have a little bit of a routine. After 6 months of this constant feeling of urgency, uncertainty, and ultimately futility, because I don't feel like anything is ever going to get better. I feel like I'm rowing a lifeboat with these patients in it, circling the wreckage of where the ship went down. That's what it feels like to me. And I don't know how much longer I can even keep doing this physically and emotionally. And I have one of these budget meetings coming up where I have to justify my existence. One of the groups that I've come up with through all of my research of what might help is a meditation group that we do a couple times a week after lunch. So I have this little cassette tape, because it's 1992, with new age music on it, and people come in who want to, and we play the music, and I do a meditation counting back from 10. And there are sounds coming from other parts of the unit of something crashing. That's not that unusual. People drop things. The sound of people yelling, that's not unusual. People are hallucinating. You don't know what they're seeing sometimes. But now it's getting louder, and the sound of yelling are the nurses, not a patient. And they are getting louder and louder and louder. And now what has happened, I see, is there's a psychotic patient that got away from the nurses, and she is running toward the room that we're in. And now she runs into the room, and she is coming for me with maximum force. I am bracing for impact. I've seen this happen on the unit before. I know I'm in trouble. She's coming for me. But then she gets to me and she pivots. It's that cassette player. She hates that music. And she takes the cassette player and she starts smashing it and smashing it and smashing it. It's just shocking. And then she goes up to Davy and she smacks him right in the back of the head. And he goes flying into the middle of the circle. And then the nurses get control of her and they get her away, calm her down. And all of us are just stunned and looking at Davy with, oh my God. They rush to him and they're like, oh my gosh, are you okay? And he looks up at me and he says, you know what, Jude? It wasn't that bad. And then we all burst out laughing and he sits down and they're like, oh my gosh, Davy, of all people, I can't believe that happened to you. And he says, you know, except for getting smacked in the back of the head, I was having a really good day. And everybody else nodding, yeah, we were having a really good day. And I think, wow, okay. The reason these people care so much about him and understand him is because these groups that we do every day that feel like nothing to me. But people are hearing each other and they care about each other. And if what I can do is that and give them a really good day, that's my purpose. That's my existence in this job. That is enough. And I'm able to stick it out and continue to get paid for 2 more years on that unit. Every morning, there's the sound of music. I thought about this story when I was reflecting on my conversation with my guest today, Shari Hazlett of the Social Justice Improv Project, who uses creative tools, storytelling, improv in her community organizing. I hope you enjoy. If you enjoy stories like this, head over to Spotify and check out Funny Story with Treder-Wolff. They're true stories from my life, often told live on stage. Thanks for listening.
This podcast is brought to you by LifeStage. LifeStage provides opportunities for people to gain skills and knowledge for navigating today's uncertain world. The capacity for creativity, connection to new ideas and other people, collaboration, and community building. For more information, visit lifestage.me.
Welcome, Shari, to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here, and I want to give a little brief intro to our relationship. I loved being part of the Social Justice Improv Project that you did at Magnet Theater. There's a lot of crossover between the imperatives or the goals, I think, of social justice movements and what we do in order to improvise, which is lift each other up, collaborate, really listen, embrace uncertainty. And so there's a lot of interface there in the technique and the values of improv and the values of projects that involve exploring themes that are directly impacting people's lives. So I love that you're doing it. I love being part of it. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how did you jump into that, or did you ease into it? What's a better way to put it?
So the Social Justice Improv Project came out, which was a very literal name, by the way. It came out of, there was a grant that I got through the city of New York during the city's reopening. I think it was 2021 for COVID. It was to expand the arts again, reopen the arts spaces in New York City. So it was a generous grant, and it was an opportunity to do something. So that was really cool. And what came out of that, and what I wanted to do, I felt like it made sense, was the Social Justice Improv Project. Specifically, I think at that point, we were all starved for human connection. We'd been in our houses, locked down, and we were doing a lot in Zoom and these video platforms. But it was a way for us to connect. Now, your question, how did I get into this? So it was not random. So early in my career, I would say at the beginning of my career, almost right away when I started college, I got a job as a community organizer, program coordinator for a nonprofit organization where I lived in Tampa, Florida. It was a Tampa AIDS Network. And I had done some volunteer work with them in high school as well, working with children who were infected and affected by HIV and AIDS. So I was 18 and I just started college and I had a stupid retail job that I hated, but there was this paid opportunity to do something that I was interested in, was working with at-risk youth throughout the community in Tampa and some of the other areas in the county. And doing that through the organization, they don't just give you prescriptive things to do. All of a sudden you're working on a grant funded project. I was 18. I had no idea what was going on. I just started college. But I did know that I felt very passionately about, in general, the community preventing HIV and AIDS, just because, having worked with those kids and that kind of thing. So it was with the same organization. One of the things that I learned really quickly was, and I hate to say I felt it intuitively, but in a sense, I did recognize that when you work with people who are at risk of anything for, social services agency, most of the time you're not going to be part of that community at all,
Right.
And here I am, this 18, 19-year-old girl having to go and, identify places, organizations, social groups within communities I was not part of and had not been part of, and find points of connection, essentially. So early on, there were things that I learned to do to connect with these communities. And the other piece that was kind of happening simultaneously was that I was also a political activist. And so I got this fellowship with the Human Rights Campaign. It was their campaign youth college, they called it, where they trained us for a week with some of the top campaign and political advisors in the country. at the time. And then we would go take that training to specific targeted races throughout the country. So it was interesting because these two things were kind of happening at the same time. So I did the training and was sent to Seattle to work in one of Patty Murray, U.S. Senator Patty Murray's reelection campaigns. And taking both that practical training, like voter targeting, what are constituencies, and that kind of stuff, and combining that with what I learned about just being in community with people, those kinds of things. I guess it kind of like came together in a sense, because what happens is people don't gather because they care about the same issues specifically. Maybe there's an element of that there, but really what people do if they want to do something for any kind of change or anything like that in their community, there's emotion there. There's something that's motivating them and driving them to be there. And there are points of connection. And there can be, even amongst groups of people that don't seem like they have anything in common with each other, there's a reason why we all show up for things. So that was some of the there's some early on training and tactics and things that I learned, but also experienced at the same time. And the other piece was Marshall Gans is a well-known organizer. He worked with Cesar Chavez in the 60s with farm workers. He eventually ended up at, Harvard, that kind of stuff, but was an influence on Obama and actually was one of their organizing strategists for the 2008 campaign. And one of the things, he had this framework for organizing groups of people, and it's called it's like our story of self, a story of us, and a story of now. And when you tell these three stories together, it's like your public narrative, essentially, is what it's called. And when you do that, it can be public and in the media or within, groups, small groups of people coming together for a shared purpose. So sharing stories with each other, but for a very specific purpose to take action.
You were drawn to this at such a young age. Like you were so young and open, obviously, to not easy stuff. I want to say there's a little bit of crossover between you and me that I just discovered. It's actually a direct connection that my first intro into using theater, not improv exactly, but improv adjacent, but theater on point, was with the HIV and AIDS community on Long Island.
Oh, okay.
When the epidemic was raging, and I was involved with an organization that was doing services and counseling and things for people with HIV and AIDS and their families, they asked me to write some theater pieces to do education. So I did interactive theater where we created characters that were either impacted by the disease or had the disease. And then we got actors to play those parts and go into schools and interact with people because there was a lot of fear around it. And there was a lot of stigma around it.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then these scenes turned into a full-length play. We ended up doing productions. I accidentally wrote a full-length play. It was more like one scene led to another scene, to another scene. Yeah. But it was a very, very exciting, very painful, but good. Good painful.
Cathartic.
Well, I felt like we were part of something that was helping people in time of pain. And theater is never easy. There was, people walking out, people. Yeah. But at the same time, it definitely galvanized. I interviewed so many people to write these characters. So they were real people in a way that were amalgams of people that I had met. And when people tell stories for a common purpose, it is galvanizing to their real lives, to their daily activity, to how they feel in the world.
Because of the emotion, because people are connecting with emotion, right? And this is what I've used in theater specifically too, is that when people share their feelings about things, not just I did this and then the next thing happened, like plot, more of this is how I felt along that journey. That's what people connect with and relate to, both in the rehearsal room, in the boardroom, when you're things like this, more like social practice focused theater, that's how those emotional details and things get drawn out. And that's what people connect with.
Right. And that's how people get a sense that when they're not alone with their suffering.
Yeah.
And if they're not alone with their suffering and they're connecting to other people who also have a shared struggle, together we can move toward solutions. They don't always get to solutions, but I think just having community is in and of itself a very healing thing.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And there's something where, I don't hold a professional license in terms of counselor, therapist, or anything like that.
What?
But
you can't be on this podcast. What? We need you to.
Oh, no.
No, I'll handle that part. I'll handle
I'll
handle the license mental health
I was about
part.
to talk about emotions, but I guess anyone can talk about emotions.
Anyone
That's fine.
can talk about
Yes,
emotions.
You're right. We should talk about emotions more. Well, there are definitely some emotions that inspire action. So especially when people are telling these stories, and again, let's say in the rehearsal room, you're building ensemble. So there are some emotions that can inspire action, which can be helpful. So when these stories, when you're asking people to share their stories and that kind of thing, focusing on certain types of emotion, like as the facilitator, can inspire people to connect with and feel inspired to take action. So for example, they're called like action motivators: urgency, let's see if I can remember all of them: urgency, anger, hope, solidarity, and you can make a difference, right? So all of those things are kind of positive. It's okay to feel angry because it means you feel something. You feel passionately about something. A lot of times, anger is also, it's more of like frustration. So those things will inspire people to, or they motivate action. Now, we've seen bad people motivated to take terrible actions. But the other thing too is, at the same time, and I'm sure you've seen this and other people have seen this, is that you can tell a story, but it kind of like inhibits action, right? Where inertia, like this always happens. We always do it. People always want to come in and make change, and then we never did. So there's this sense of inertia, activity, but no motion. So when people feel that, that's hard to pull something from, whether it's to, create a story or to inspire a group of people to move forward. Apathy, people don't care. So like, how are you going to inspire action from that? And then, let me see, Fear is another one. People are afraid, you're not going to want to take action. And then isolation and self-doubt. Those are the other two. Isolation, fear, that kind of stuff. Remember, during the pandemic, you're in a different mindset. In a sense, it's hard to take action when you're afraid. It's, activating a different part of your system. So with the stories, thinking about too, is you give prompts and, work through things with ensembles or in groups, is helping facilitating the emotion shared and stuff like that, and kind of guiding the process, so to speak, when people do share stories and stuff like that, to identify and it's okay to feel apathy, it's okay to feel fear and all that other kind of stuff, but those are things that's part of the narrative, but what actually is the overriding emotion, the emotional arc, and that kind of stuff that inspires people. Because at the end, what you want people to do is feel like, oh, you know what, I was afraid. And then I felt a sense of solidarity with other people because, we got together, we were afraid, but then the solidarity is the emotion that is shared with people that we can use to take action.
Okay, so let's talk about the relationship between those goals, subverting or transforming is a better word.
Yes.
Apathy and fear, particularly, I would say. Apathy and fear are probably, and self-doubt. Apathy, fear, self-doubt, and the closing in that happens from being burnt out. So improv as a practice, when we get into a room and we teach people how to support each other, be creative, listen, play, and at the same time, there's a very deep and sophisticated and powerful purpose to being together, which is that we're going to get some skills so that we can actually create something together. So I think there's a real parallel there between learning to improvise and then taking those skills into the real world.
Yes, absolutely. Because I think, that place where when that happens, that's where you're kind of, and you mentioned this earlier about you're living in the uncertainty and you've identified it, right? And ambiguity and kind of living in that. And that's sort of like that place where that can come from, which I think is an interesting place to be in. It made me think of another organization I work for called THAP, Tampa Hillsborough Action Plan. And it was a Black founded run organization that had multiple arms within the community in Tampa, to everything from housing, food security, business incubator, all of that, like most specifically within the Black community. It was it was a little bit modeled after the Black Panthers. And part of that was also social services, specifically HIV and AIDS, because that was massively impacting the Black community at that time at proportion to the rest of the US population. And one of the programs that I worked on there was it was a treatment adherence program. And specifically, we had to recruit people to come into these, it's like twice monthly sessions that, were in various stages of, most of them had HIV diagnosis, not all had the AIDS diagnosis yet, to bring in their lab reports and that kind of stuff, but to come in various times. And then we would track their progress. We had a lot of people that they hadn't felt like anything was meant for them thus far, like any programs or anything like that really address the issues of treatment adherence, like medication adherence, because of the stigma within the community. And that was the thing that emerged. I think each of the groups, and we ended up running like 5 to 6 and did them in cycles, but with each of the groups is so fascinating because none of the people, and I think this happens, like you see this in improv classes, most of the people, it's like this interesting cross section of life. They don't seem to have anything in common, but then they do kind of get into that space of vulnerability when they're in that uncertainty, ambiguity, that kind of thing, where they're able to find those places of connection.
I'm wondering if you have an exercise that we could
I
do that
do.
you could walk me through. Okay, great. So I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
That's why I'm excited. That's the improv side of this podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, so so public narrative. So this is an exercise that I've done within an organizing context that I do use with the social justice improv project and even with building ensemble when you're doing devised work that comes from the individual sharing their lived experience. When you're telling these stories and getting to what like the group is going to do, there's kind of like three layers to the story. Okay. The first one is your story of self, like why are you here? How'd you get here? And when I'll give like a specific prompt. And then the next one is it's what is the story of us as a whole? And as the facilitator, I identify those things. And then the story of now, what are we all together knowing who we are? What are we going to do now together? What is our shared purpose? Let's say there is a group in a community, maybe it's a group of neighbors or something like that. And there's something in your neighborhood that the group of you would like to change. Maybe it is, for example, in my neighborhood, something that was important to me was we didn't have any garbage cans in any of the corners, at any of the street corners at all, where I live in Brooklyn. I mean,
There,
blocks and blocks, no garbage cans. So like, what are you supposed to do with your trash? So I don't know. So is there something maybe in your community or your neighborhood that would be, because you're going to be the one to do this, I'm going to walk you through it. I'd like it to be relatable to you.
I'd love to have something juicy, but off the top of my head,
It doesn't
I
have to
don't
be.
have anything, but I'm going to make this one. I live on a very scary, I live in the most sedate suburb in Long Island, but
Mhm.
people drive like maniacs on these streets and they don't stop at stop signs. And so there's just occasionally like a lethal crash that's just in this because
Mhm.
people just don't. I live on a street that's very hilly. So the street that you could come over a hill and there's a stop sign there and people don't see it coming and they just don't care and they
Yeah.
don't stop. So that isn't a very juicy problem, but it is a safety issue.
And the thing is, the problems don't have to be juicy.
Right. We're talking about the process. That's the most important thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's better that it not be juicy because then there's
Okay.
a lot more to
Right.
deal with that we don't
Right.
have time for.
Okay. So
Um,
this affects my own safety, my neighbors, the kids, dogs.
mhm.
I've once there was a dog in the middle of the intersection and I was losing my mind because of people
So,
racing through this intersection.
okay. Okay, great. So what brings you here today is that we can, your other imaginary neighbors are here too. So I'm hearing what brings you here today is you're concerned about safety in your neighborhood because there's a lack of street signage or,
There's plenty of signs. People don't
oh,
either the police are not around to notice and give people tickets, but maybe we need a street light. But people
mm,
blow right through the stop signs. There are plenty. We agitated to get signs. There are signs. Every few blocks, there's a sign.
oh.
People still go 70 miles an hour on this road because they love flying over the hills like they're a great adventure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it sounds like what would normally the normal thing that would be put in place is not a solution that's working for your community. And it sounds like you're concerned about safety and something else needs to be done to address a unique problem within your community.
That's
People
right.
are ignoring signs and it's causing a safety issue. And you mentioned something about a dog. What did you see?
Well, I
Mm.
live at a four-way stop. It's just a
Okay.
few feet away from my house. And
Yeah.
this dog that I didn't know, so it didn't know me, was in
Oh.
the middle of the intersection, just kind of probably got away from home and was not responding to me. And I have seen people blow through that intersection at 80 miles an hour. It's nearly killed me a few times, but I was very scared that I was going to see something that I would never be able to unsee. The
Yeah.
dog wouldn't come to me. I ended up calling animal control. They came and got the dog, but I didn't know what was going to happen. And I thought, I don't know what would make people drive better around here. I don't know the answer to that. I really don't.
Right. And you don't have to. And that's an interesting point because that's something that as the group, our shared collective resources and knowledge and understanding of ourselves and our community, we can get to that, right? So bringing that is great because you clearly feel very strongly. I mean, it sounds terrible, and I was worried that the dog story was going to end up in a terrible place. So thank you.
Thank goodness that didn't happen.
God. Yeah, that's fantastic. And thank you for sharing that because so what I'm hearing also is that there's a bit of fear, right? Concern a little bit, right?
Worry. Yes, I feel worried.
Worry.
Hmm.
Okay. Maybe would you say, is there any like anger can be like a little thing like, I'm mad at these people that don't that don't do that.
Yeah, it's
Maybe.
one of those, it's such a general, like I don't know who the people are who don't pay
Yeah.
attention to stop signs. There's a lot of drivers that I see doing, terrible
Sure.
things. They're a threat. And I don't like that feeling of just not being able to
Mm.
trust other drivers. So it isn't personal to them because I don't know them. you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, it sounds like something though that's pretty timely, and it sounds like I don't want to ticking time bomb, but like something that definitely there's a sense of now, like something needs to happen quickly.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's great. And then so that's what brings you here now, the story of now, and that's like an urgency kind of thing. 'Cause you're feeling that you're here with your imaginary
Neighbors.
neighbors,
Yes. My
with your
neighbors,
neighbors.
all
Um,
equally concerned about their kids,
yes.
their dogs, and themselves.
And that's great. And we can sometimes we feel that, but like what called you to make that change? And this is the other piece here. Like what experiences kind of what shaped that? Like aside from being a human and not wanting to see people get injured or dogs.
Well,
Hmm.
I'm not sure if this is relates to what you're going for, but I'll
Okay.
just share it and then we'll go
Yeah.
from there. But I did lose someone in a car accident when I was
Oh,
young, and I had a dear friend die and another friend lose a leg in a car accident that was very avoidable. It was partly recklessness on all of our parts. We were young and didn't wear seatbelts, I think. But the idea that anything can happen and recklessness can happen and then that's fatal is always been with me because I think I
yep.
was 17 when that happened. And so that like car crashes that can happen in irrevocable consequences, that's
Yes.
doesn't leave you. That's once you know that happens and someone can die and someone else loses a leg and that's it.
That directly relates. You see this thing, this accident waiting to happen, clearly something like you said when you were 17, that was something that happened to you and impacted you. So it's very present for you and that absolutely maps onto what's happening in your community. Now, someone else in your neighborhood may have a different experience that led them here, might not be the exact same thing, but at the end of the day, what it is, it's that it's safety and community safety in a
Right.
sense, right?
Right. So let me ask
Caring.
you a question. So when
Yeah.
you're doing an exercise like this, so I tell my story, tell my backstory about like, okay, maybe the reason I'm easily triggered by this is because I did have someone die in a car crash. And then other people might, I know this happens in storytelling in
Yes.
general, that someone else goes, oh, that's me too. I
Sure.
actually have a similar experience. And then someone else might say, I don't want more police in this neighborhood. We don't need to be policed.
Right.
I don't want, and that might be their experience would be like, I've been harassed by the police. I don't trust the police. That it kind of just means, I think what you're getting at, I like the idea. I'm not sure this is where you're getting at, but that I like the idea that people could have diverse points of view. They're both valid concerns about making some kind of change, which would be either more police around here to catch people so people know in a way like you can't get away with it, or we need to, how do we up our game? I don't know, it's just geography.
Yeah, no, and that's a great question because as the facilitator, one of the things that you do, and like I was asking you questions, I'm like, okay, it sounds like there must be something that like you seem to have a lot of feelings about that. It's part of the job of the facilitator to kind of pull out some things that could potentially be common threads
Right.
as people start sharing their story and also reminding people what I usually do to set up too is like, this is not the solution part of it. This is sharing, being heard, listening. And then there's an opportunity for people to ask questions because there'll be things that they're curious about and that kind of thing. So what happens is a lot of times you'll hear there are like a few common themes. And that's when we say like, okay, cool. Well, what is our story? What are some things here that we share? What are the common themes? And as the facilitator, pulling those out and getting people to comment on it. Once you get to that point, that's when you're like, okay, cool. What's the action now? Like, what is it that we're going to do? And then also, too, well, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. We've already done it and that kind of thing. So there's, it's kind of putting that aside and saying, like, okay, cool. Well, it sounds like we
Yeah.
have these few ideas and these are some things we can explore. Let's take a look at what that is.
Well, I want to just
Yeah.
reflect back. What I'm hearing is that what you've done with that exercise is a
Mhm.
bit like when you're starting in an improv class and everybody, I mean, it's not a bit like it. When you're doing an improv exercise, you're not talking about yourself, but what you're doing is establishing connection from the very beginning. And this is using people's real lived experiences, making it safe for people to then connect. And on their own, they're going to organically hear something of themselves in what someone else is saying. maybe their experience is different, but they're all human beings, and you listen for themes and you
Yeah.
pull those threads out and then highlight those. I like the way you did it. I'm imagining there was different versions of, let's say there was like I just represented 3 or 4 different points of view, but then you would pull those out and then everybody would feel heard. And also, oh, okay, we do care about this thing in common or that thing in common. Like you said, safety, we care about. We also care about autonomy in our community. We don't maybe want a surveillance state or something,
Yeah. Red
you
light
know,
cameras. Yeah. People. Yeah. And I know where those conversations go. Yeah.
but
Um,
that's a using a creative approach to getting people to open up and feel really connected to each other. And I love that. And I love that that's really the heart of community organizing, I guess, is what you're saying, right?
it is really, it's the connection, but then the next step is the action, right? And it's because there's the role of facilitator, and I say facilitator, not leader. It's because really, ultimately, at the end of the day, it's like I said, calling out, hearing things, and getting people to see those themselves because it's the community. Whatever the community is, whoever your constituency is, they have a set of skills and experiences and resources that when you identify those, that's where you understand, like, okay, this is the kind of action we can take. And that's for that community to recognize and understand and harness for themselves. And something I do, it's a little exercise that I do in a theater space specifically, and depending on the group for ensemble, is I will give the group, and I did this with the second iteration of the social justice improv project, our second review before the one that you participated in. Everyone had prepared their stories using this framework. They submitted ahead of time. And then I told them, just be prepared to share your story, except what I did have folks do, and this was with a group that they knew each other, but they hadn't really shared stories like this in this format specifically. And I had them, when one person was done with their story, the person that followed them, I wanted them to listen to some details and things like that. And I was like, I need you to find the connection points that lead to your story. Do not change your story, but there will be some things that can relate, even if it's like someone has a mother and so do you. Great. Do that.
Right.
That's fine. But it's listening and hearing what those things can be, even if they're very distant, because we know ourselves. And a lot of times what we look for in other people are, oh, that person does all these things just like me. And that's what we look for. But it's not always about that. You can find those things amidst everything else that is not like you. You have to listen hard sometimes, right? And find it.
That's a great idea because it gets people to really focus on the other person. If they're saying, oh, let me find 1 or 2 things that we, just like when you said you started in the world of HIV and AIDS, and I did also in terms of activism. I worked in mental illness before that. I was always in the field of mental health, but for people with deep mental illness. An advocate is the word that I felt, more than an activist. I didn't really feel like I made much headway there. But it was in the AIDS world that I got involved with using the arts, really using the arts to raise awareness, to get people involved, and to tell stories. So learning that about you drew me in, and then I had a fun detail to share with you, and that just deepens the conversation because there's a shared purpose that we brought to this conversation that neither one of us even knew was there.
Absolutely. And I think, as we all know, there's a lot of polarization in the world right now. And it can be very, very easy to put ourselves into silos, into these echo chambers where we only want to interact and only have conversations with people that are exactly like us, that share our exact opinions and have our same points of view. And I understand that might feel very comfortable, but that's not how the world is. That is not how, we as a society connect with each other or learn and grow for ourselves. We learn through others and our interaction with other people too. And so I think, like these kinds of things are important. Like why, just like improv classes, yes, get in a room with a bunch of people that you might probably have nothing in common with. It doesn't matter because we do have shared things. They just might not be obvious. And it's okay if you don't have the same political point of view as somebody else. I mean, there are some extreme exceptions, obviously, but
the idea is, even if somebody does, and
sure.
it might not come out for a while, there's a gift, and I think there's a bit of hope in the idea that you can play together. Because if people, even if somebody has a point of view that you find very different from your own, but at the same time, or I should say, and using the improv language, and we can play together in this neutral space where we're going to create a reality. We're going to create a reality together. And I always say that I've written articles called this in more than one place, but that why improv is how making things up together helps us deal with reality. Because when we make stuff up together, we're doing the work that you're talking about, which is, can we make a new world? Can we make a new community? Can we make a change in my suburban world where people are a little bit more safe? Can we do that? Well, we could imagine a reality together that's outrageous, that's wild, that where we're characters that we might never have played and not even know what someone else's political point of view is. It means that we can collaborate. We can collaborate over differences. It could get tense when you start to find out things you don't approve of or don't like. But I do think what we bring to that then, we've had an experience together where we saw that other side of them. We already have that experience. And that's the value of that lived experience, like a creative, fun experience.
That changes us too. And even if, let's say, we don't agree, and it's not about arguing or changing someone else's mind or point of view, but like even just having that interaction or hearing from them where they're coming from in general, but even with people who don't share opinions, that's important to know. And I think in just that shared experience work, like with a group, absolutely can change us. Having those interactions and being in that space of ambiguity, uncertainty, figuring it out and doing it together, I think changes us for the better.
It rewires our brain.
Yes. And something that came to mind, the SJIP, the acronym, the show that we did, the one that you were in, the one that I directed, it was June. It was scheduled for the end of June 2023. And the name of the show was It's a Riot. And, we did like the 3 rehearsals, and I knew because we couldn't get that many people into the same room at the same time. So I did kind of like 3 rehearsals, and we did a little more focus on pre-planning, structure, that kind of stuff. And the It's a Riot theme came because it was June and it was Pride Month, and Pride was a riot, so on and so forth. Great. So I'm sure you remember. So we're all excited. Oh, this is going to be a fun like Pride show and, fun, but also educational. That Friday afternoon before the show, the Supreme Court released their decision. It was the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe v. Wade. Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
I don't know if you recall.
Yeah, not a big deal.
No, not at all. It was like, SCOTUS doing their thing, which I think really, obviously, like we still have a lot of big feelings about it, and we're, kind of still dealing with that impact. But, especially something like that, thinking Roe v. Wade was, that was decided, it was set. And I think for our cast, one of the things I remember people were really like, should we do the show? I think a lot of people were kind of in a weird space about it. And we'd done the rehearsals, but we were kind of focused on having structures and then being able to kind of plug in some topics and audience suggestion and stuff. And I remember everyone came to the theater that day. And one of the things I did for some of the suggestions was kind of change. I changed it a little bit. Some of the themes and topic that we would explore using our plan structures that were very specifically focused on performative activism from government, like that kind of stuff. Some of the things that we focused on instead was having things be a little bit more related to that, because it was like, I felt like we needed to do that because there were tickets sold and people were coming to the show. And we were all there in the theater that day. I remember this. Everyone was kind of like, I can't believe we're doing this. What's happening? Like, I think everyone was just kind of in shock still. And I was like, you guys, everyone's here because they need this. And I think we do too. And that was such, I think for the cast too, it was such a moment because I think it was very cathartic in a sense. Yeah. It wasn't just about a process to do a show. I think it was like what we created and expressed in the show was so important for the audience too at that time. I feel like for me as a director, that absolutely changed me for sure. And I could see, a lot of the cast members were like, whoa, I think doing something so personal and so immediate also was really impactful because we all had our stories with that and how that related to us. And it was so real and in that moment, which I think is also very powerful when we bring that to the stage.
Well, and just talking about the urgency and anger were probably the 2 feelings that most people brought to that moment, and the sudden, just the abruptness of it. But it called on all of our improv impulses to come together and make something, express something and make something with those feelings. And that was so healing to do that. And it's been with me ever since. It's just to use the skills of improv to make something.
Oh, yeah, it was. It's funny. I I rewatched the video recently. So I was putting my website or whatever. And it was funny. I remember, and I saw it too. I remember when I introduced the show, like I was sort of crying. Yeah, because it was so, but that was really we needed that in that moment. But it was also the audience too. I think they were there with us. They provided a lot of the suggestion and all of that. And I think our ensemble was prepared to do that. And we all did. I think in a sense, think about things changing us. It's like within the ensemble, but also too, like as an ensemble in that relationship with the audience, I think that was good for them too, because it's like, oh my God, are we gonna are we gonna laugh about Roe v.
Right.
Wade overturned? Yes, yeah, we did. Not about that specifically, but
No, but we made some very, very funny scenes. I mean,
oh
we made some very funny scenes. And
yeah.
it was one of those truth and comedy shows. There was so much truth in comedy because those raw emotions got transmuted into something that actually was, you could so engage with it. And I also value the improv experience in situations of great urgency or tragedy or pain, because improv isn't about solving it. It's about expressing things and exploring ideas and going out in all different kinds of directions. So this episode is a little bit different than what we usually do, because we usually do some like skill building that somebody could take with them. But what I hope that we're expressing is the idea of improvisation is part of your life all the time. So a decision comes down from the Supreme Court, or something happens in your community that takes away your sense of control,
Yeah.
or changes the world, disrupts what you're used to, and disrupts what you think is right or what you think should happen. And somehow we have to find a way to adjust and move forward. And that is what improv teaches us to do. So I always encourage people, take some improv classes and get those skills, then go out in the world and say, oh, I can grasp things that I'm not crazy about, or change that's happening to me that I'm not happy has happened. I can grasp it, I can accept it, I can absorb it, and I can respond to it. And that's the best. We don't know how it's going to end.
It's ambiguity, right? It's living in the uncertainty and ambiguity and being like, you know what, I've done this before. It's good practice for that. You don't have to want to be an actor, stand-up comedian, whatever it is. It's not about that. It's like you get the connection with people, you make a lot of new friends, and also you just get comfortable. You get exposed to ambiguity all the time, constantly, over and over and over again, until you're like, well, I don't know what's going to happen, but that's fine. I survived it before. I'll survive it again.
And in surviving ambiguity, I don't think people like that word at all. I think I'm just saying, as a therapist, people are like, it's this or it's that. And in reality, no, it's not. It's like something is always emerging out of something else. The truth is, we never really are settled. We're always going through things. And improv is a wonderful, any creative process, but improv in particular, because it's happening in real time right now. We're going to go through this together, and we're going to tell a story right now and create characters right now, or just play a game. Just playing a game. We don't know how a game is going to end. That's what makes it fun. That we don't know how it's going to end. That's why we like it. So using games and exercises trains us to be, as you said, not only tolerate, but accept the ambiguity of reality. And the thing is, we have agency, and we have something we can say and do that impacts what's happening.
Well, that's, I think, what's interesting about improv as well is that it really can help people understand not just understand that they have agency, but what that means for them, because it's not the same for everybody.
Absolutely.
And I think improv has that potential and that possibility, and I've absolutely seen that. And there's, with facilitation and things like that, those things can definitely happen. I think one of the things, like the social justice improv project, one of the things that I felt compelled or like called to do that in that moment specifically was that a lot of times in these environments, we're being asked to be vulnerable. We're being asked to share ourselves and stories and details and like go through all these things. But at the end of the day, what ends up happening, sometimes there can be like dominant voices and a sense of like, oh, well, we all just need to have consensus. And with this, it's not about consensus, right? When you're organizing a group of people, you can have different points of view and you bring yourself. How do we weave that together? And whether just like as an individual in an improv class, how am I heard? How am I feeling a sense of agency, not getting bulldozed, like all of that? How does that relate to everybody else? But also in life as well, being able to, coexist and live, work side by side with people and, create change and do amazing things with people that we have a shared purpose, but we don't all have to conform to a dominant narrative necessarily. It's about what is our narrative together.
I love that. I think that's probably a good point for us to to pull this together is shared purpose. And I'll just add to your summing that up so beautifully that skill building through experiences, like taking improv classes or doing a storytelling kind of exercise like we did, that skill building helps to express that purpose and to find other people and get to know them and really to move through the world with a sense that you are not alone in it and create something with other people. So Shari, tell everybody how they can see you on stage or where they can find you. And we'll also put everything in the show notes, of course. But where do you want people to find you and what you're doing these days?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, you can find me on Instagram at Shari Hazlett or on my website, which is also sharihazlett.com.
Also, do you want to mention this show that you do at Under St. Mark's? Because that's a live stream and people could watch that from anywhere.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah. Living Radio, a really great team of folks. This is my second season with them. It's a monthly live show and podcast recording at Under St. Mark's. And it's 6 radio plays written by playwrights that a director then directs a cast of a few people through on the weekends, whatever, like a few hours. And then following Monday, we put the plays up and they're recorded into a podcast. We do live Foley and all this other stuff, but it's called Living Radio. It's kind of modeled after the old Living newspaper. We take headlines and the playwright writes a play based on the headline. They're usually funny. Sometimes terrible news, just you can do something with it that can give us, for the cast, but also the audience, a chance to, just kind of laugh and release and share the feelings together. So yeah, that's really great. It's Under St. Mark's the first Monday of every month, and you can buy tickets online. You can either come or live stream.
Thank you for this amazing conversation. Love the work you're doing. I'm glad we have this connection all these years. And I really appreciate you being here talking about social justice improv and organizing for a better world. Thank you, Shari.
Thank you so much.
That's it for this episode of Improv in Real Life. For more info about our guest and other resources, you can visit our show notes. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please follow or subscribe wherever you listen. And if you're feeling extra generous, write us a review or share with a friend. You can also find us on Instagram at lifestage_inc. And if you want to dive deeper into these concepts, please connect with me on Substack at Treder-Wolff. To be continued, to be continued, to be continued. We need each other now more than ever. We need creativity more than ever. I hope these games and ideas inspire you in some way. And if they do, keep it going. I will too. See you next time.